Hello and welcome to This Is the best game console on the market.
Don't you say it.
Announced.
Don't you say it, Matt.
Here we go, Xbox. Here we go, Sony ponies. Here we go, Nintendo Defendos. The best console currently on the market is the one that is not in your pocket yet, but it's the iPhone 15 Pro. Do you hear that?
No,
Do you hear that? That is the collective sigh of millions of gamers are all over compromising.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts, Matt, but would you just care to present your thesis to the
So, during the Apple event,
Yeah.
they said that we're going to have a handful of AAA titles, and they're going to be running natively on the phone itself with ray tracing. Assassin's Creed Mirage, a game that's not currently out yet.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that.
No, so yeah.
They were a little unclear. They
Yeah.
talked about it in the same breath as ray tracing. I don't think they
Yeah,
specifically
we'll
said
see.
that
But,
Assassin's Creed would have it.
The fact that we have a AAA game
Yeah,
that
impressive.
is going to launch on a phone, not even just the iPhone, a phone.
Are we paying $70 for a phone game? Okay, now I get that it's the same games on like your PS5 or whatever, but like I don't know if that's a thing.
That's that's what the answers we don't have is if this is gonna be the actual game itself. I don't know if you remember like kind of a weird time during the PSP era where we'd have the same game but it'd be like watered down for the PSP.
They had like a Mirror's Edge version. They had like Need for Speed. There were a bunch of games. I know
We're
EA
like
was one of the big ones.
they market it as the same exact game.
It's not. I'm just gonna go under the assumption that they're telling the truth, that it is basically the full game. So let's just go through logistics, because I want to talk about the performance one, but let's go through the logistics of this. If we start to see these real AAA games, first of all, high price point. Even if it's not $70, say it's even $50, right? That's probably more expensive than
over $10 is going to be a hard sell for an audience who's not used to paying for games on a phone.
Then there's storage to consider. I am assuming that these games are probably 80, 90, 100 gigs on like console and PC. Surely the resolution and the textures and whatnot are going to make that a little bit smaller, but we can still be looking at a 50 gigabyte game, which is a big deal. I'm also curious, is it going to be only exclusive to the 15 Pro? Like, does this need the A17 Pro chip to run? Because here's the thing that I'm curious about on the back end. This was touted as like the most important full GPU upgrade that Apple's ever seen. They were talking about not only the ability to handle ray tracing, to get, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% more performance, but importantly also better efficiency and better sort of long-term speed. Because it's important to consider that with phones, what you see is like the peak burst speed usually doesn't work well with games. You know, you might get that sort of top level performance for 5 minutes, and then the phone starts to overheat, and it starts to come down to a little bit more of a manageable level. Can I just say something from the technical side?
Yeah.
They've pitched this as a 3nm chip. It's a huge revolutionary upgrade and whatnot, but can I just say that based on the specs that they have given and some of the Geekbench results and whatnot that are starting to come out, you know, we're recording this a couple days before the actual phone is in our hands, but it doesn't actually seem like it's maybe a particularly meaningful update. Now, there are more modern GPU features, I'll give them that. We've got ray tracing, we've got variable rate shading, we've also got things like the Metal FX upscaling, which we've seen on the M1 and M2s and whatnot. But to me, it's like, I know that they've pitched this as this massive upgrade, but is it that huge of an upgrade? I'm curious.
As usual, Austin Evans, you're thinking too little brain. You need to think big brain.
Okay.
You need to go big. What else have they announced this year in terms of gaming? Apple, that is.
Well, they've announced a lot more emphasis on Mac gaming.
Okay, but how do they do that?
Through Apple Silicon?
Through their game porting toolkit. Can you compare to me the A17 chip that is in the iPhone 15 compared to, say, an M1 or M2?
Well, it's a newer generation across the board. So even though it is a smaller physical chip, it is likely going to be in the vague ballpark of like an M1, would be my guess. Without actually having, put them side by side. It's going to be closer.
If they have these game porting toolkit that are able to go to M1, I don't think it's that hard of an ask to say, okay, this game porting toolkit will go to an A17. Or, like you said, we have a very small sample size of these things.
Yeah.
What happens when we get to the 18 that maybe catches up a little bit to the M series? So while this particular update might not be massive, we have some pretty massive potential. Again, I always like to put my big asterisk here. We have them dipping their toe into the Mac ecosystem.
Yeah.
Laptops and whatnot are great, but there are way more iPhones in the world.
Yes.
They know they're not going to be able to break into the PC space right away. They know they're not going to be able to say, like, all right, Apple's for gaming now overnight.
They're
gonna
trying.
they're gonna have to chip away at it.
Sure.
And so they have this toolkit, which is, like I said, I don't think it's gonna be that crazy for them to adjust that for the iPhone chip.
Actually, I agree. Yeah.
But there's a ton of users who don't necessarily want to be a PC gamer. Every argument you have against cloud gaming with something like Xbox, well, it's native.
Yeah. No, this
Like,
is an actual game that's running on your phone.
It's on the device. So yes, like let's go back to your thoughts on, like, all right, cost.
Yeah.
That is a big one. Regardless of how much logic you think of it, of like AAA games cost $70. It makes sense on an Xbox. It makes sense on a PlayStation. It makes sense on a PC. You're never going to convince someone to buy a game on an iPhone for $70. It's just not going to happen. What do they have also that has been largely ignored for a long time?
Arcade.
Apple Arcade.
So you think that they're going to throw these AAA games on Apple Arcade to jumpstart it and instantly become a Game Pass competitor?
I think what they're going to do
Pretty good idea.
is we're bringing in a couple developers.
Yeah.
We're going to have them, develop specifically for this. Let's get this proof of concept going, blah, blah, blah. Then when they actually have the dev kit out in the hands of multiple devs, which I was like, you can just download that right now. I got Diablo 4 running on a Mac right now. I have zero dev knowledge whatsoever. Once they get to this point, and then they can bring these into Apple Arcade, which way more devices than Xbox. True. Like billions of phones. But then one of the big requirements for Apple Arcade is that everything has to be unified across the board. So in order to get a game into Apple Arcade, which is why I don't think these games are currently going to Apple Arcade, is because for it to work on Apple Arcade, it has to work on every Apple device.
Every category.
Category.
So
it doesn't have to
Mac,
work on old.
iPad, iPhone, and Apple TV is required,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Has to have controller support. We've been talking about this for a long time. Like, why can't they just put an M1 chip into a Apple TV? And one of the thought was like maybe thermals or something like that.
Yeah.
So like you say, I think thermal performance is gonna be the big problem here of like who's playing a AAA game on their phone for long periods of time.
Well,
and I feel
no, I disagree with that. I think if I'm buying a AAA game, I am going to be playing it for long periods of time. If I spend 50, 60, 70 bucks, I am the person who's going to sit down and do a 2-hour gaming session on my phone. Again, I have some questions about this whole thing. But I do think there's a real argument to be had that the iPhone might become a proper gaming device. One area of concern is, of course, going to be controls.
Controls have somewhat already been solved.
You just get a backbone.
Right. The backbone has already been confirmed to work with the iPhone 15.
Yes, you just buy the USB-C Android version, just plugs in and works.
Already confirmed to work.
How do you think something like an iPhone is going to match up to, say, a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally?
I think it's going to run better.
I actually think it might be in the same vague sort of conversation as the performance of a Steam Deck.
Right.
Actually, that doesn't seem like unreasonable at all to me.
No, like I think running at like 30, 45 FPS.
Yeah.
Which a lot of stuff on Steam Deck, that's what it is. I think that's going to be pretty close. But the difference is how small this is compared to a Steam Deck.
But the phone advantage here is that the Apple A17 Pro chip is a significantly newer chip, right? So it is on a 3nm process. It is going to be much more efficient. There's, I think, a real interesting comparison of once you get like Assassin's Creed up, throwing that up on the phone. Now, mind you, we can't talk about this too much right now because we won't have, I don't think it ships till early next year is what they were saying. So we're gonna have to wait a little time. I'm curious to see, like, the phone might be the dark horse of the gaming handheld space.
Now an iPhone can start playing AAA titles. Yeah. This might be what gets some of the Android holdouts to start switching over.
Speaking of comments, people are going to point out that this is not the beginning of ray tracing and whatnot.
Ray tracing is just a buzzword to me. The important part here is that we are getting a AAA game that is launching on a new gaming platform.
Yeah.
This has never happened at this level ever.
There's a real shift here, and that obviously part of it is just Apple trying to signal that this new iPhone 15 Pro is so powerful and so pro, and the Apple Silicon stuff is so good that it's good enough to be a proper gaming device. But there's also something else, like we're seeing such energy in the portable gaming PC space, of course, between Steam Deck, between the ROG Ally, between all the Neos, between Switch 2. Like, there's all of these things that are going on right now. And I don't think anyone really expected that the phone would catch up to the point where it's in the same conversation. But you think about stuff like the Apple Game Porting Toolkit, which I know that that's designed for Mac. But the thing is, at this point, Macs and iPhones are so similar in so many ways, between the Apple Silicon underpinnings, between the fact that macOS and iOS just get closer and closer to having the same architecture every year. There's so much that's sort of being shared. I actually can believe that if you are a dev and you want to port your game to Mac or even iPhone, it's getting more and more feasible. As far as getting a proper AAA game running on an iPhone, it seems like it's actually a real thing now.
If they can do this with the chip inside a phone, imagine the console they could make with like an M2 Ultra. Every year when Apple comes out with a new phone, oh, they didn't change anything. This is the biggest change to me in an iPhone in years. Have you ever seen me this excited about an iPhone?
Yeah, the Mini.
I do like the Mini.
Yeah, the Mini was a way bigger update.
Why go out and buy another console if I could just pull out the one that's in my pocket? How is you as a gamer not really excited about this?
But there's so many questions. That's the only reason why I'm intrigued but not excited. First of all, I want to see more than 2 or 3 games announced at an Apple event.
I want to see 3 more than we've ever gotten.
I know, no, it's great. It's a good first step, but it does feel like it's a first step in a probably multiple year journey before we see something like this become more meaningful.
But also, why the hell can't Switch give us more than 720p at this point? Let us know in the comment if you're excited about AAA gaming on your iPhone. Are you still going to say that iPhones are overpriced pieces of garbage? Let us know. Like, follow, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.
And the Switch 2 is still going to be good, man.
Not as good as an iPhone.